There's something happening on this show that viewers can't stop noticing, and honestly, the more you pay attention to it, the harder it becomes to ignore. Melody Shari has been gone from the show for a while now, yet somehow her presence still dominates the atmosphere almost every single episode, and that alone raises a much bigger question than people are openly discussing. Because normally, when someone exits a reality show, especially someone considered a major figure, the energy eventually shifts. New storylines start forming, the cast begins focusing on current relationships, and the audience slowly adjusts to a new dynamic. But that is not what's happening here at all. Instead, Melody's name continues to appear in conversations, arguments, emotional moments, and even situations that technically have nothing to do with her anymore. And the fact that this keeps happening tells viewers something deeper is going on beneath the surface. At this point, it no longer feels like occasional references to a former cast member. It feels like the show itself still revolves around her influence, even in her absence. And when a person can leave the stage but still remain the center of attention, that usually means their impact was far more powerful than anyone wants to admit. What makes the situation even more interesting is the fact that Melody herself does not appear to be chasing the validation of the show anymore. In fact, from the outside looking in, she seems to have fully shifted her focus toward building her own lane. She's growing her brand, expanding her business ventures, connecting directly with her supporters, and creating spaces where she controls the narrative instead of depending on producers, cast dynamics, or edited storylines to define her image. And that level of independence changes the entire power dynamic, because when someone no longer needs the platform that once elevated them, their presence starts affecting people differently. Suddenly, the relationship shifts from dependency to curiosity. People begin watching how they move outside the environment that once tried to contain them, and ironically, sometimes leaving the platform increases a person's influence instead of weakening it. That's exactly why viewers are beginning to question why the cast continues bringing her up so often if she's supposedly no longer part of the equation. Because if everyone truly moved on emotionally, why does her name still carry so much weight every time it enters the room? And that question became even louder after the recent episode. If you really watched closely, you could feel the shift happen in real time. The conversation already had tension before Melody's name came up. Emotions were running high, frustrations were building, and people were clearly carrying unresolved feelings into the discussion. But the second her name entered the conversation, everything escalated immediately. The energy changed, the reactions became sharper, the emotions became more personal, and suddenly what could have remained a contained disagreement turned into a layered emotional explosion involving past betrayals, old frustrations, and lingering resentment that clearly never disappeared. That moment revealed something important about this cast dynamic. Melody's presence still acts like an emotional trigger point within the group. Her name alone is capable of reopening wounds people claim to have healed from, and honestly, that says more about the remaining cast than it does about her. Because here's the reality viewers are beginning to recognize. Every time conflict begins intensifying among the current cast, Melody somehow becomes part of the discussion again. Sometimes her name is used to support an argument. Sometimes it's used to justify behavior. Other times it becomes a way to redirect blame or shift attention away from the actual issue happening in the moment. But regardless of how it happens, the pattern remains consistent. And patterns matter, especially in reality television. Because over time, patterns reveal the emotional structure underneath the show. They expose who still holds influence, who still carries emotional weight, and who the group subconsciously centers when tensions rise. In this case, it increasingly feels like the cast built so much of their dynamic around Melody that they never fully figured out how to function without that connection. So even after her exit, the group continues orbiting around the energy she left behind. And to really understand why this keeps happening, you have to look at the deeper history between everyone involved. This isn't a simple situation built on one disagreement or one dramatic moment. These relationships were shaped over years of emotional conflict, loyalty shifts, competition, misunderstandings, alliances, betrayals, and public confrontations that played out in front of millions of viewers. That kind of history does not disappear overnight just because someone leaves the cast. The emotional residue remains. Every unresolved issue remains attached to memories people never fully processed. So whenever Melody's name gets mentioned, it doesn't just remind the cast of her specifically, it brings back entire seasons of emotional tension attached to her presence. And viewers can feel that immediately because the reactions are rarely casual. They're emotional, defensive, and deeply layered. That tells you the wounds underneath these dynamics never fully healed. One of the most revealing moments from the recent episode came during the argument that completely spiraled beyond the original topic. What started as a disagreement quickly turned into a collision of past and present frustrations. And honestly, those are usually the moments when reality television becomes most revealing. Because once emotions reach a certain point, people stop speaking carefully. They stop filtering themselves. They stop protecting appearances. Instead, they begin speaking from emotion. And emotional honesty often exposes truths people tried avoiding for a very long time. There was one particular moment where a cast member directly confronted another in a way that cut through all the surface-level politeness. The statement wasn't softened, it wasn't hidden behind jokes or vague comments. It was direct, personal, and uncomfortable. And the reaction that followed spoke volumes, because the response wasn't calm disagreement, it was immediate defensiveness mixed with visible emotion. And whenever someone reacts that strongly after being confronted, viewers naturally start wondering whether the words hit deeper than expected. Social media only made the situation even bigger, and honestly, that's another major reason this storyline continues gaining momentum. Today's reality television audience doesn't simply watch episodes and move on anymore. Viewers analyze everything. They replay scenes, compare old footage, revisit interviews, track inconsistencies, and build their own conclusions in real time. In many ways, the audience has become part of the storytelling process itself. And when viewers notice repeated patterns involving Melody's name constantly resurfacing, they begin asking questions production may not have intended people to focus on. That's why online conversations after the episode became so intense. People started debating whether the cast genuinely moved forward or whether they're still emotionally attached to unresolved issues connected to Melody's departure. Some viewers believe that constant references prove her influence remains unmatched. Others believe the cast simply struggles to create compelling storylines without revisiting old dynamics tied to her presence. But regardless of which side people support, one thing became obvious. Melody is still one of the most talked about figures connected to the show, despite no longer actively participating in it. Another layer making this situation complicated is the issue of accountability, because longtime viewers remember everything. They remember old arguments, past alliances, previous betrayals, and how certain situations originally unfolded. So when narratives suddenly shift, or certain details are selectively emphasized while others get minimized, audiences notice immediately. And recently, many viewers have started pointing out inconsistencies in how accountability is distributed among the cast. Certain actions from the past continue being revisited repeatedly, while other moments seem conveniently forgotten depending on who benefits from the conversation. That imbalance creates frustration, because audiences don't like feeling as though the story is being rewritten in front of them, especially when flashbacks and editing choices appear to reinforce one perspective while leaving out important context that could change how situations are interpreted. And honestly, that's where reality television becomes complicated, because while the emotions are real, the storytelling is still shaped through editing, production decisions, and selective framing. What viewers see is never the complete picture. It's a constructed version of reality designed to create emotional reactions. And perhaps that's why this entire situation feels so unsettled right now. The show seems caught between wanting to move forward while still relying heavily on the emotional energy attached to the past. On one side, there's an obvious attempt to create new storylines and shift focus toward the current cast dynamics, but on the other side, the repeated return to Melody's name keeps pulling the show backward emotionally. And the tension between those two directions is becoming impossible to ignore, because every time progress begins happening, old wounds resurface again. Every time new conflicts emerge, they somehow reconnect to previous emotional history involving Melody. And until the cast fully addresses why her absence still affects them so deeply, the cycle will probably continue repeating itself. At the center of all this is a much bigger lesson about influence. Real influence does not disappear the moment someone exits a room. In many cases, true influence becomes even more obvious after a person leaves because their absence exposes how much space they were actually holding together. And that's exactly what viewers seem to be witnessing now. Melody's impact didn't end with her departure. It continues showing itself through conversations, reactions, emotional triggers, unresolved tension, and the way cast members still position themselves around narratives connected to her. Whether people want to admit it or not, her presence still shapes the emotional structure of the show. And now, the biggest question moving forward is whether this cast can finally break away from that cycle. Can they create compelling dynamics that stand fully on their own? Can they move beyond constantly revisiting the same emotional territory tied to the past? Or has Melody's influence become so deeply woven into the identity of the show that separating from it completely is no longer possible? Because right now, the show feels trapped between two realities. One side is trying to evolve, the other side is still emotionally anchored to everything Melody represented. And until that tension gets resolved, her name may continue carrying more power in the room than some of the people still sitting in it. And honestly, that may be the most revealing part of this entire situation.